What's going on? What's going on? Urban Collective. It's your man and IC alongside.
What's up, y'all? It's your first lady, Miss Bernadine Truth. Hello, hello.
How's everybody
Happy to be
doing?
back.
Huh?
I know. I'm just happy to be back on air. I feel like a week ago was just so far.
Really? I
So
feel
much
like
has happened.
the weeks have been passing and flying by, actually, for me.
No, I think it's been flying, but I
Yeah.
still feel like I'm like, whoa, like a week already happened. Like that's intense.
It's about to be May this Friday. That's crazy. Like, I feel like April just started and it's already about to be May. So that to me is very, very, very fast. I wasn't expecting it to pass by so fast, and especially being indoors, being quarantined and everything. So, but what about you? How you doing? How you been holding up since last week?
So I've been good. I've been picking up new skills, if you will.
Okay.
So that's been so fun. So I'm like, with the inability of going out, self-care and self-maintenance is something that I really do value and prioritize for me personally, right? Like that's like my me time. So I haven't been able to get my manicures and pedicures. So I'm trying to my cousin purchased equipment so she can do her own gel manicure. So I'm waiting to see how she does that so then I could try it. But I've done my own pedicure, which is awesome. So I've exfoliated my feet, which I love. There's the exfoliation peels that you buy and you put them on your feet, and then for like an hour to an hour and a half, you take them off, and over time, your dead skin starts to legitimately like peel off, and you have to peel it off. It sounds gross, but it feels amazing. So my feet still feel very, very soft, and I'm really excited about that. I also bought clippers a few weeks ago. And I cut my own hair this weekend, which was an experience. Not cut my hair. I gave myself a lineup.
The lineup?
I think went phenomenally well. But a Bernadine experience can't be a Bernadine experience without a mishap. So
what happened?
I don't know. I may or may not have been so focused on getting the perfect line. And I was and may or may not have been so focused on the top of the blade that I didn't realize that the bottom of the blade was on my eyebrow. And I may or may not have cut off my eyebrow, but
yeah,
I only have the beginning portion of my eyebrow right now on my left eye. The middle and the end just don't exist, but right now they do, because the joy, I guess, if you will, of being a woman who does brows is having eyebrow equipment. So I have a little bit of crayon, a little bit of a little bit of gel, eyebrow gel on my face to make sure that
so if I was
what's
up
missing
here,
is
go
not
like,
captured. Yes, if you wipe it off, it will be gone. So, I'll tell you that. So other than that, it's been great. I think really picking up, but all jokes aside, like picking up the trade of doing my own lineup and like my my eyebrow now, and my manicure and pedicure has been great. I also had my first virtual spoken word performance today, which was awesome.
Really?
For Vital Village, an event that they were hosting, a monthly get together that they have with different partners who support a lot of families, parents, students, etc., providing them with resources. So they invited me to speak today. And so that was great. Had a lunch break session with them. Things have been good. How about you? What have you been doing to stay busy?
For me, same thing as you. I went and I did, my hair was getting too much for me. So I went and I got a haircut. When I said I got a haircut, I had the wife give me a haircut. She did a good job, did my lineup and everything like that. It's not as perfect as, the barber, but I don't have as much hair on my head. Like, I haven't gotten a haircut since early March. And that's very rare. I usually get a haircut every 3 weeks, max 4 weeks, but 3 weeks on average, haircut. So it was very weird. Like, I was feeling hair in the back of my ears, and I was like, what is this? I had to use a comb for a while, so that was very weird. I usually don't use a comb. I usually just brush my hair. So having to use a comb and everything like that, that was like throwing me off. Besides that, enjoying the weather this past weekend was pretty good.
It was nice.
All the rain and everything late Sunday or so. Saturday was a decent day, so I enjoyed it. grilled a little, and just working. Try not to watch the news as much. Trying to stay positive because otherwise, being inside for this long, it drives you crazy. My wife and I, we've been watching Ozark. That's actually
that's a good show.
That's a good show. We're on the 3rd season. We just started the 3rd season today.
Okay,
so
it's good.
Yeah. So that's about it. That's about it as far as the things that I've been doing.
The ending of Ozark is one of those endings where I was like, okay.
Don't even start with me.
I was just kind of like, oh, this is how I'm gonna end the show. Okay, cool.
Yeah, the first season, I actually started watching it when it first came out like 2 years ago, but I only saw like 5 episodes. I stopped watching it. Like the first couple episodes were a little slow and everything. So I was like, And then I heard people kept talking about it. So I saw the first season. I never watched the 2nd season or the 3rd. So I was like, you know what? Perfect time. Quarantine. I'm not going anywhere in the evening. So I started last weekend and just finished the 2nd season from last weekend. And so I'm looking forward to this 3rd season and everything like that.
I'll be honest and say I have not watched the show seasons 1, 2, and 3 all the way through. I watched them in bits and pieces.
Oh, God. Why do you do that? You always do.
That's my style, okay? So, and then I'll read. I read in between. I'm like, oh, what happened in the show in this episode? What is it? What focus? You know, like I'll read articles, just to see what I've missed, if I've missed anything. And I'm sure I have. But just knowing how it starts and how something in the middle and then in the end, I'm like, I feel like that's enough details for me. But I definitely will stay up to date with the next season. The other show that I actually watched in full, in totality, was Little Fires Everywhere, which is an adaptation of the book, and I really like that. I thought they did a great job putting that. The directors did a good job putting it together. Yeah, me too.
Shirley told me
a day and a half.
She was like, "Oh, you got to watch this." I'm like, "I don't like these shows normally." I was like,
they did a great job.
It's like I feel like they're like very women centric, and it's not my type of show. I'm not even gonna lie. So I was like, you know what? And then I sat down. She's like, "Just watch one episode." I was like, "All right, fine." So I sat down, watched one episode. I was like, "Oh, play the next."
Right. And then the next.
4 hours later, it got deep, and I was like, "Hey, no, we're watching this." So it actually wasn't bad.
No, I loved it. It was like it was the only show I think I've binge watched, if you will. I've never binge watched anything. I've never finished anything. And that was my beginning to end. And I was just like, okay, all 8 episodes or 6 episodes, 8 episodes, I think.
The way they ended
I was like, it was great.
The finale, I was like, wait, is there another episode?
I don't think they're coming back with it though. If it's a full adaptation of the book, it ended how the book ended too.
Are you serious? Oh wow.
So we'll see.
I'm like waiting here. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna
unless they extend it and then they'll create their own rendition of what they think it would look like. But that's it.
I gotta tell her that because we're like, oh, dude, we can't wait for the next season because I gotta see what happened.
I actually hope it's done. I hope it just stays that way. I think that would be great. Dope. I think just leave it alone. It's one of those like less is more situations, right? Like because then it can evolve and you're like, oh, look, I like season 1, but I didn't like season 2. I'm like, just leave it alone. That was great for what it was, but we'll see. Yeah. But I was gonna say, I was like, from thinking about like the week since the last time we were on air to this one, some updates for the world. For anybody who's out there who are entrepreneurs, I wanted to share some information with them that yesterday, really Monday, April 27th at 10:30 a.m., the SBA resumed accepting Paycheck Protection Program applications from people, which I think is phenomenal, right? So the stimulus package, this effort to support folks has been an intense one. One that has been criticized by a number of people, but then also one that has been celebrated. And I think that regardless of where you are on the spectrum of feeling like this is positive or negative, I want people to know that if you are an entrepreneur, small business owner, and you're in need of financial support, to please, 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 please go to the SBA or any affiliates that are connected to them. Apply for the Paycheck Protection Program. If you haven't applied already, contact folks if you have applied already. This loan will this iteration of the loan will goes out to support all employees that a business has, to keep them on payroll for at least 8 weeks. And then, you know, if the money is used for payroll, rents, mortgage, interest, or utilities, then that loan will then turn into a grant. And so again, if you apply for this Paycheck Protection Program, you get accepted, your money comes your way. Again, keep people on payroll for 8 weeks, and the money is used for payroll, rent, and if the money is used for payroll, rent, mortgage, interest, or utilities, again, it turns into a grant, which is great because that level of support is not something that needs to be paid back. So I encourage you all to go out there if you haven't already. Go onto the SBA's website for support if you need it, and make sure you apply. That's what I'd say. And I see any updates for you?
Yes. Actually, my update started playing before I could start talking. Aliens are real, y'all. That's all I'm gonna say. So the other day, just yesterday, actually,
that gives me chills.
On Monday, today's what, the 28th? So Monday, April 27th, the Pentagon released some videos, not released videos. Videos were already released. And what they did is that they officially re-released it. And the video shows what appears to be unidentified flying objects that are moving certain ways in the sky that normal airplanes or normal aircrafts that is known could not move. One of them, you show the video, and the pilot, the Navy pilot, is like, this guy's going against the wind, and the wind's coming at 120 miles per hour, and he's going against it, but moving so erratically, like all over the place. And the speed at which he was moving, it just could not be explained at all. So I'm finally happy that they actually came and said, you know what? This is real. This is happening. I wonder what it took for them behind the scene to even come up and admit something like this, because this is something for years people have been talking about, from Roswell and everything like that in New Mexico. So I am so happy that they actually came out, released a video. But now the question that I have is, how many more videos do they have? Or how much more information do they have?
I'm not ready.
Can you imagine, like, next week they come up and be like, hey, we have a freaking alien body.
This conversation is making me nervous.
Yo.
This conversation has me nervous.
I don't know.
I want to call them something different, because I feel like the way we talk about aliens and immigration, people, you know, it's like the full positive, like the people we don't want around, or the objects we don't want around. Like, you know, it's anxiety provoking, I think, just in general, just by the name. So if there is life out there, then let that be, but it doesn't have to be something that we're scared of. I feel like I'm scared of it because I've been conditioned to be scared of it. I don't even know if there's something for me to be scared of. And then again, it's just like, not to say it lightly, but again, we used to call people who migrated from here aliens, right? Like,
yeah.
And I'm like, that's not true. And so I think, like, there's power in words and there's power in conditioning. And so I don't know. I'm hearing you and I'm like, okay, like, that's cool scientifically, possibly, but then I'm also just nervous about it, right? And I'm like, why am I nervous? I don't even know what that is. And so the fear of the unknown is real.
The only thing that I get nervous about is throughout human history, whoever has the most power, whoever's the more powerful nation, has always come and taken over. You know, the less fortunate. Those from America, Africa, Europe, Asia, almost everywhere. So that is probably the only thing that I worry about, because I'm like, if this race is able to travel millions upon millions of light years to get to us and travel like this, that means they're way more advanced with than us technology.
It's an assumption to think that would even be something they'd want to do, right? Like, so we're conditioned to do these things too. So, like, who's to say they're not peacemakers? Who's to say they're not like, I don't even care for this, or, you know, like, there's nothing that says that. So I think it's one of those, continue, and no pun intended, right? Watch the evolution.
I know.
Literally, it's the evolution. And speaking of an evolution, I want to shout out my auntie, my cousin, my big sister, Michelle Obama, for doing phenomenal work. So this woman has been great. Before she was the first lady, she was an amazing first lady, and now post her position in the White House as the first lady. She's just hip. She's up to date. And I'm giving her a shout out because so she has joined together, right? So Teddy Riley and Babyface were in their battle. And they're doing their thing, and they shut down Instagram, and for this amazing like R&B battle that was taking place, and it was dope. I loved it. I got to participate. I saw Babyface play the guitar. He was singing to me, so like that was really beautiful. I felt very connected to him. But Michelle has partnered with them to really encourage people to go out and vote, which I appreciate, right? And so for her to have that level of commitment, she's partnered with she's partnering with them to really encourage people to go out there. And I want to say like her her hashtag right now is focused on when we all vote. And so it's really thinking about what does that look like for everyone who is not necessarily aware of this 2020 election that's going to take place November 3rd for this new president, right? And so she's trying to get into pop culture. She's trying to talk to the younger folks. She's trying to get the older folk involved, like anybody who's really listening to music or who's just in the world of social media and who's active in these platforms to begin with. Just really, again, watching her merge or tap into various generations for what is truly a major event in American politics to come in just a few months. Like November 3rd is going to come faster than we think. And with everything that's going on with this pandemic, I know that we're all rightfully focused on that. But I think that we also need to think about other things that are happening all around us. And particularly with this next election, that was a hot topic before the pandemic took place, like bringing it back to the forefront, watching Michelle commit and talking about, again, when we all vote, how important that is. And just kudos to her for being out there and for recognizing what's already happening. And she's tapping into spaces where she doesn't have to necessarily reinvent a wheel, right? And it's just like joining in on forces. So I love that. She also joined forces with DJ D Nice when he went virtual for one of his events to have a voter registration party, right? So again, she's doing her due diligence, I think, to tap into spaces where people are thriving and just talking and reminding us of other elements that are important to who we are. So listen, Michelle, I love you. And God. I thank you. Well, and when we all vote, the world changes. So remember that.
Yes. So going from one Michelle to another Michelle,
nice.
We have a special guest for everyone tonight that we wanted to bring on and interview. So Bernadine, you can take it away and introduce Michelle Wu.
Absolutely. So hi, Michelle. Welcome.
I can't even be in the same conversation though as like my first lady, my president.
My president, right? She's that amazing, but you're amazing too, Michelle. So for those of you who don't know, Michelle Wu is a daughter of immigrants from Taiwan, is Boston's first female Asian American city councilor, and was the first woman of color to serve as Boston City Council president. At 35 years old, Michelle is currently the youngest member of the council and the first councilor and council president. Not anymore.
Yes, as of this last bill, that there's Councilor Arroyo and Councilor Bach are in their early 30s.
Oh.
Well, excuse you. So she now has companions, and I love that. So, but at 30, now that Michelle is 35, she is still one of the individuals who had two sons actually while she was in office, which is phenomenal. To be able to watch them grow up has been awesome. One is 2 years old and the other is 4 years old. Michelle has been a national voice for bold progressive action at the local level, authoring successful legislation for paid parental leave, healthcare equity, prohibiting discrimination on the basis of gender identity, procurement reform, creating equity and opportunity for minority and women-owned businesses, language access, and healthy food purchasing. As a cyclist and transit advocate, she fights for transportation access as fundamental to economic mobility, racial equity, and climate justice. There's so much more to say about Michelle. She's been featured on Elle Magazine's This Is 30 issue, and as part of Mary Claire's magazine, Regard. Again, like the 50 most influential women in America. Like, you are phenomenal. And the accolades only continue. And I would love us to continue to have a conversation with you to learn more about who you are, what you do, your role in Boston, and really talk about what's going on right now with our pandemic too in the days of COVID-19. So without further ado, I turn it over to you, Michelle, to say hi to the people.
Yeah, hi. And now I'm going to edit my bio so I can put that I have officially been a guest on the Urban Collective show. So
I'm excited to have you. You're so amazing. I support you. I'm a proud supporter of Michelle Wu and all of your work. So I'm excited and honored to have you on air with us today to just have an open, honest conversation about your work, what you do, and how you got here.
Yeah. So Michelle, with having such an amazing bio that Bernadine just read out of everything you've accomplished at such an early age, 35, when she told me that, I was like, really? I was like, oh, wow, that's amazing. What led you to serve Boston, the Boston community?
You know, it's been a kind of surprise journey for me. I'm the oldest of 4 kids, and my parents are both immigrants from Taiwan. So they came to the U.S. when they were in their 20s, no money in their pockets. You know, I remember stories my mom would tell us of just what they had given up to come here and the history of trauma in that kind of multi-generational immigration story. Their parents had also been immigrants from China during the Civil War, and they kind of fled to Taiwan during that.
Yeah.
So for them, it was kind of just starting over and that little bit of hope of what the American dream could be. So I was told my entire life growing up that I was just supposed to do good, make a lot of money, don't get in trouble. And I mean, obviously politics doesn't compute with any of those things. And then the world kind of turned upside down when my mom had a mental health crisis, and I was kind of fresh out of college working downtown in Boston. And my mom, who had been the force holding us, all 4 of us kids together, you know, she took care of everything. All of a sudden she couldn't take care of my little siblings anymore. And she couldn't even take care of herself for a while. So that kind of changed everything. I went back home and started raising my 2 sisters, who are a good deal younger than I am, trying to take care of my mom. She's been having her mental health challenges since then. But in that time, you know, it really kind of hit all of us just how much government matters and how stressful it often is when you're supposed to be providing services, but the very people who need them in that moment, you're making it really hard when people have to take off work to just get in the door, or it's not in the right language and this and that. So I kind of try to stay motivated by knowing what it's like outside government and keeping myself, you know, these days no one's really going into City Hall, but my philosophy has always been you should be out of the office more than you're in the office and connected to the people. So that's what got me into thinking about government. I then had then Professor Elizabeth Warren as a law professor, and when she ran her first campaign, I just volunteered to help, and then saw how much politics matters too.
Thank you so much for sharing that, particularly around your personal narrative, right? And talking about mental health in your family and how that is definitely provides a different lens, I'd say, of how we see the world and how we navigate through systems and institutions, particularly when, you know, you have your mom is vulnerable to so much. And as a result of that too, you and your siblings are now vulnerable to so much. Having family with their own challenges with mental health, I truly relate to that. And I thank you again for your work and your inspiration. Thinking about what's been going on in Boston now, given this pandemic, right? We've always known that Boston is very diverse, but in many ways also very segregated. Discrimination, racism is part of, unfortunately, the culture here. With that being said, the impact of this pandemic has disproportionately impacted people of color. In your opinion, how has Boston's existing institutional and systemic levels of racism and inequalities and inequities increased since the rise of COVID?
Yeah, what I've been saying is that we know people of color in Boston have been basically hit 3 times as hard by COVID. It's showing up in the actual kind of hospital numbers and the public health side. Our communities of color, particularly the Black community, has a way disproportionate share of number of cases and unfortunately number of fatalities. And we can get into all sorts of the reasons why. You know, a lot of it is that people, the difference between having the luxury of staying home and keep protecting yourself and your family versus having a job where you're not going to get paid if you don't come into work, and then you still have to be exposing yourself on the T and at work, and you're on the front lines, and the same people who had been fighting for benefits, fighting for decent wages all along, largely residents of color, are now having to not just do those jobs, but also take the health consequences of it. The second way we're seeing people really bear the burden of this pandemic is on the economic side, that the businesses that were likely to shut down, hourly wage workers are our frontline workers, mostly people of color in Boston doing those jobs and taking that hit now, really, really struggling to think about how to pay rent, how to put food on the table. And then the third way is that even in the relief programs, and this is it just reminds me of when we were trying to get help with my mom and get a little really, the very people who supposedly, are supposed to get help, the very places where the need is greatest are often the first to be shut out of the relief programs, because it's not they haven't translated into the right other languages until much later in the process, and it's kind of, you're already behind in knowing what happens, or there's an application process and it's open to everyone, and of course, who's going to get it? It's the people who have lawyers and consultants doing those applications for them,
access to the support.
So we know, all it takes is look at the maps, right? You look at the maps of where COVID is hitting, where the cases are, superimpose that on the maps of where there was already housing instability before, where there was food insecurity, where there's greater exposure to air pollution. And it's baked in deep to our society. Now this should be a huge wake-up call to everyone. It's time to take care of all of that we were dealing with before. And we got to fix some major stuff now, but let's think beyond just how do we make people healthy from COVID? How do we make people healthy and supported and live in communities that are strong?
Exactly. And I appreciate you sharing that sentiment too, because I think one of the things we need to highlight is that a lot of these disparities and inequalities that you're talking about they're not prevalent and relevant now because of COVID. They were already part of our system here. They were already part of what was going on. We see it in education. We see it in healthcare. We see it in businesses. We see it in who has the opportunity to even open up their own businesses, depending on what type of industry you're in, right? Like, it's always been around us. And so now it's in some cases, no surprise to see that, again, the historically marginalized population is impacted by this at greater risk. I say to people all the time, we went from Black people can't get this virus, it's not impacting our community, to now we're the ones impacted at the highest rate around across different state lines. So thank you so much for highlighting that for Boston too.
So one of the things I wanted to ask you, Michelle, with COVID becoming rampant in our communities and in the U.S., you have a lot of Asian Americans that are facing a lot of discriminations throughout the city, throughout the U.S. What can we as a people do to help out? And also, what can the government do, especially to help out while these people are facing these discriminations?
Yeah, this has been a really painful part of it as well. Even before COVID was really in the US, when it was just kind of percolating and people were just starting to hear about it on the news, we already felt it in Chinatown, right? We already felt it in a lot of Asian American communities, because there was this gut, like, for some people it might have been unconscious or whatever, but there was, there's plenty of, just like scroll through my Twitter feed, you could see plenty of overt racism that is still really being linked to COVID. And I can't believe we're saying this in 2020, but it is coming out of the mouth of the President of the United States, right? Like that is that is where people are getting kind of permission to lean into hatred and racism and, like on and on and on, all the isms. So that, we got to figure out the situation in November. That's a whole side show.
Listen, this is why the two Michelles are the best.
But I think on the API directed racism now, just like real talk, a lot of it is community to community, right? A lot of it is, it's not just about people who are privileged who might hold biases. A lot of it is from other communities of color, and I think we haven't found a way to really have that deep conversation. I think Asian Americans often fit in a funny place in our society because we, you know, it's a very diverse community in general. There are those who are many professionals and, you know, like doing very well economically. Then there are many new immigrants who are struggling. You know, in fact, the highest concentration of poverty in Boston by ethnicity is in Asian Americans, because there are so many residents of Chinatown and Vietnamese residents really, you know, below the poverty line. But sometimes it's hard to have these conversations when you're in the middle of crisis, you know, that we should take this as a reminder that we have to keep having these coalition building conversations all throughout the year, right? That my community, the API community, has to figure out a way to really stand with Black and Brown residents when there are lots of other issues that sometimes I think we have been, you know, as a group or as a community, maybe less vocal about. Some of that is culture. Some, you know, I was growing up to, as I said, my parents always said, don't shake the boat, like don't stick your neck out. And there's a very strong history of activism in the community as well, but we have to find ways to kind of build those ties. And it's amazing and so meaningful when people are standing with the API community now. But this has to be a conversation all year round of how do we really understand the systems and the systematic inequities that we're facing together, and come up with that solution that's beyond, you know, this community versus that one versus that one.
Absolutely. I thank you for that too. As I think about some of the articles I read, even in China and other parts of Asia, where Black people were also kicked out of their housing residencies or, you know, denied support and shelter during this time. And I'm like, listen, we're two racial groups, if you will. Of course, ethnicity is broken down into that as well, but you know, that are dealing with this pandemic or impacted by this pandemic in disproportionate ways. And we're being insulted, we're being targeted. And it's so sad to see us going against each other at a time where understanding the stress and understanding the tension, it should be bringing people together to say, hey, we as a group of humans need to be able to combat this, to be able to come on top. So I appreciate you and that insight as well. With some more positivity, though, I'd say, or to shed light on some more positivity, right? We're living in a time where a lot of criticism has come to our nation's leaders for not responding enough, for not really taking this reality seriously quickly enough, and putting systems in place to really support folks. But you, on the other hand, you've hosted Facebook Lives with community members. You've introduced Boston Stay Home Challenge. You've been an advocate for more equitable relief funds. You know, can you tell us more about why you chose those types of initiatives to connect with Boston's constituents, and shed light on additional ways of building community in Boston?
Yeah, it's really scary now for everyone. And I think one of the worst parts of COVID is that it really cuts against all of our natural human instincts that we want to be together when we are worried about something. We want to, when we see people who are at risk or in trouble, we want to kind of run over there and take care and find ways to gather. And because everybody is now necessarily, you know, for public health, apart and distance, you have to find other ways to support community and strengthen that. I think this applies for all crises, right? If you look back at every major weather disaster, and there's this incredible study of what happened, for example, in the Chicago heat wave in the 1990s, where people knew it was coming, it was going to be a certain number of days, and yet across the city there were a lot of people who didn't make it. And it wasn't necessarily by income level that you saw the differences. The splits in terms of which neighborhoods kind of survived through it better than others was based on how much people were in touch with each other before, how strong that social fabric was, because they were then checking on their neighbors. They were taking care of each other. They were finding ways to activate that phone tree or check in and see who had air conditioning and who needed to come over for shelter. And so this is still a time that reminds us just how important that those ties are, that we need to check in on each other, that we need to know each other. I keep saying one of the best things we could do for our democracy that I think would fix everything if we just did this everywhere is to fund a block party on every single street, right? because so often, especially with social media, we tune into people that kind of agree with us already, and if you don't agree with them or they don't agree with you, kind of, you push the button and then you move on to your other world. And it's really rare now for people to just be together and know each other and care about each other because you have a stake in the same street. You live on the same block. Maybe you're not in the same political party. Maybe you don't, your top issue isn't the same top issue as this other person. But we should know our neighbors. And I hope that this is reminding us that there are many other ways to get to know your neighbors and to create spaces for people to come together.
I love that. And then the Boston Stay Home Challenge too. You encourage us to support minority-owned businesses, right? You supported us you encouraged us to meditate, and so just really, I loved it because it was like a well-balanced challenge for folks, right? It was like eternal, that level of self-care, but then also thinking about your community, to your point. And so I love that with the Facebook Lives and all of the people you've been able to bring on. You also brought a BPS student on, which is amazing, right? To have a youth voice and perspective. And so I'm ready to go to a block party once we can be in spaces with more than 10 people.
Yeah, I know you're ready, buddy.
I'm ready. Like, time needs to come. I will host one on my street. So,
Michelle, I wanted to take it back a little bit. I know in your bio you said that you work with Mayor Menino, and he's such a beloved figure in the Boston community. I wanted to ask you, what is one lesson that you learned from him that you've used in your career so far?
Yeah, I always think about, I was an intern in his office and then got to work for kind of even past my internship as a special assistant, or, I was right on the fifth floor outside his office. And I remember it must have been my first or second day there, because I hadn't met him yet. The mayor's so busy and he's in and out, and he doesn't have time to meet an intern who just started there. And then someone had, one of his staff sent a note that said the mayor would like you to join him in his office for this meeting. This was like my second day. So I go in, and it's a meeting about a city project. The redevelopment of the then Ferdinand building, right? Now Bowling building. And it was a long table, and there's, probably over a dozen different department heads represented. The people who are from the school department who are going to move in there, and the BRA was there because they were managing the construction of it, et cetera, so D&D, everyone was there. And he started asking some questions. Again, I've never met him before. I'm just sitting there like, this is really cool. I'm excited. And then within the first 10 minutes of the meeting, he was screaming at everyone in the room because he had started asking when this was going to be done and what they were looking at. And as soon as everyone started presenting, he said, "This is ridiculous. You think about what this building could mean for Roxbury and for the residents there. If we got businesses open there, if we got the school department there, if people were investing in the community again, you are not delaying this anymore." He kind of yelled, yelled to the loudest point, told everyone to get out. And I went out. You're
like, all right, what he says, gotta go. Right.
One of the BRA folks looked at me and kind of said, "Welcome to City Hall." And I kind of skittered back to my desk and was like, okay, I need to process. I don't know, what that was. And then I looked up, and he was standing right there, Mayor Menino, right in front of my desk. And he had this big, goofy smile on his face. And he just goes, "How'd I do, kid?" Right? And so to me, the message was he was planning to make that big show of force to kind of get people back into gear, because each department was thinking about their own needs and like how long it would take them to sort everything out that they needed to do. And he was thinking about the residents of Roxbury and what it meant, and we needed to move that along. And that was always the lesson. Every meeting that I was in with him, every car ride, every event, it was always not like, this policy is XYZ fancy technical terms.
Yeah.
What does this mean for the people who live on this street, right? And I think that focus on actually using city government to touch people's lives is what I aspire to.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. It's the importance of meeting people where they are, not just speaking on behalf of them, but including them in the conversation, right? And taking them into full consideration. I thank you for that. At 35, again, you've done so much and you wear so many identities, right? So you're a previous council president, you're currently a city councilor at large, you're a daughter, a mother, a wife, you were an attorney, like, again, of many, many more titles I'm sure that you have. Which of these labels do you feel like most prepared you to be this amazing advocate that you are in the city of Boston?
So I think there are two things. One is just in general, and maybe this is because I never had any interaction with politics growing up. Like, I had never met a politician. My family was very disconnected, kind of just immigrant family. But I felt the best pure preparation for politics, the campaigning of it, the what you have to do to get elected, all that, was waitressing, right? It's anyone who has had that experience of being in a service industry where you are getting a sense of what makes people feel comfortable, how to take care of people. I mean, I felt that was really the best kind of closest fit. If you're a people person, if you just love hearing people's stories, that's all it takes, really. And then being honest about your own story. And then in terms of why I do this and kind of what drives me to take on the issues that I take on, it's, my mom, I think, has given me resilience. Those nights with her in the emergency room, seeing the barriers that she faced, language, culture, her mental health. And then my kids give me urgency, right? I wake up every day, go to sleep every night, thinking about whether I have done my part to give them the best life that I could give them. And that's not just, we each are, everyone who's a parent or a caretaker, you think about what you can do as a person. But even if I could, make the best, healthiest dinners or whatever, unless we're changing the systems that they're walking into and that the world that they'll grow up in, we're not going to give them every opportunity.
Absolutely. I thank you for that. So waitressing, as far as connecting you to folks and providing that service, but really, again, you're bringing it back to your mom, right? So both on the receiving end for you as a daughter, but also now that you have that role as well, right, as a mom, and what types of world you're creating for your children, right, based on policies and all that stems from that. What advice do you have for mothers to that note who are persisting through COVID during this time, or maybe who are, deciding, do they want to go into the field of politics? Do they have the capacity to do that and be a mom, and just, again, to persist through this world with all that you juggle?
Yeah, it's I'm sending so much love to everyone who is trying to on top of your regular juggle now in this time when daycare has been stripped away, schools are closed. So many of the ways that we had at least been able to piece it together before, family coming over some days of the week, everybody's kind of on their own right now. And that is a lot, especially for those who are caring for either your elders or kids. So on the other hand, what you have to do to make life possible for a family is exactly what you have to do to think about how to make life possible for every family, right? So I don't know if there are much better multitaskers than moms, right? Than parents of young kids who've got to get it together. And there's just this fierce passion that comes with, you're going to do whatever it takes to give your kids what they need and to give all our kids what they need. So we need you, if you are at all thinking about it, interested, curious, to run for office, to get involved. Now's the time. I mean, you look at the leadership at the national level, I think especially look at how the presidential campaign turned out. We're kind of at the verge of this generational shift, and we need, for what comes next, to be very different. Right? We need it to be possible for parents to be in positions of leadership. We need it to be possible for young people, especially young people of color, especially women of color, to be in leadership. And I think Boston's a good sort of example of how fast that can happen. You think about our amazing congresswoman, our district attorney, now a majority people of color, majority women city council. But it takes work to make that ecosystem better for everyone.
I'd say in addition to that, just add quickly, sorry, I'm going to turn it over to NIC in a second, but also bring your children with you. I think that we're living in a world too where children can truly be part of what is going on with parents and aren't just isolated. Like I think about one time when you were on a live video and your son like walked into the room, and I was like, that was the cutest video to me. Because it's like you're working, game face on, ready, answering questions, having conversation, and in comes this little human, right? And it's just like, okay, they're there, hugs, kisses, I see you, and then you keep it going, right? I think about Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. She brings her daughter around. You know, Julia Mejia's entire campaign, it was her and her daughter, right? So again, we're changing these norms too, where it's not that women can't do this work. It's certainly a sacrifice, and I can only imagine how much you all juggle as far as what you consider and what balance looks like, but it's not impossible. And again, children can be part of this journey with us. It's not so much like put them over there and find somebody else for them, but take them with you.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
So as we talk about parenthood, one of the questions I did have for you is, you know, with COVID-19, it's shown that a lot of the U.S. companies are just not adequate with the parental leave that they have for their employees. How do you see that changing post-COVID-19? And also the second part of that is, do you think the government needs to step in and help set up and make up laws so that it's nationally acceptable versus just state by state?
Yeah, so this is my pet peeve. I can't. I had my first son when I was in my first year on the council, and I learned that I was the first sitting councilor to be pregnant. So I was kind of figuring out, you know, what are the rules? What do you do in City Hall? How much leave is there? This or that. So I asked some other moms in City Hall who, you know, because I wanted to do what was consistent, and we didn't have leave then. This was in 2014 he was born.
Oh, wow.
And so we wrote an ordinance, right? I wrote an ordinance, and we passed it. And it took a while. It was too late to use with my son, but for the second son, it was there. And the city of Boston did it before the state of Massachusetts did it. And we still don't have it at the federal level. When I was doing the research back then, we were one of 3 countries not to have it in the world, not to have a federal paid leave system. I think now we're only one of 2, right? So in those years, the other one has gotten it figured out. And it's just such a reflection of what our values are. You know, if you want to make the world possible for young people, as you're saying, Brandon, you have to create space for them. Right. You have to make it so that they're not automatically seen as a distraction or you're unprofessional or you can't do a job anymore because you have a baby on your hip. And that really takes examples of people who are living the struggle and doing it sometimes not very gracefully at all. But then we got to codify that. And then we have to put that baseline. So it's not enough just for there to be some companies that give a year of paid leave and, you hope you can get those jobs. Because we know who the burden comes back to, right? It ends up being people of color, particularly women of color in jobs that are not offering paid leave. And then that just keeps deepening and deepening the pay gap because you are, again, I've studied this so much because of that legislation. Yeah. The single biggest or most common life event that pushes someone below the poverty line is having a baby. Because you are often younger, you're earlier on in your career, you haven't saved up. And then if you don't have leave, you're either stuck and a lot of people physically can't go back to work for a while. So we have to remedy that. I mean, it goes way beyond paid leave to universal pre-K and free accessible childcare. I mean, there's just so much, but we're starting to see pieces of it bubble up, usually at the city and state level.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thinking about the city and state level, this question relates to that too. we talked a little bit about racial inequities, mental health, food scarcity is something else that we're talking about with regards to what's going on with this pandemic, access to resources, right? People checking in on the elderly. Again, the challenges, I think, of COVID, or the challenges that COVID has brought up, the list continues to go on and on. Violence now, right? We had a 10-year-old get hit by a stray bullet in her own home, right? So we're seeing a lot of these experiences just kind of like transform in various ways. How do you see Boston coming out stronger after COVID, right? Like what policies and changes do you feel like are needed, both on the public and private sector side, to make real changes and progress happen during this time? I'd say post-COVID.
Yeah. So one of the, probably the most sustained push that I'm making right now in the council is in partnership with Councilors Ricardo Arroyo and Julia Mejia. We've been pushing for this conversation on how to make sure the recovery is equitable, because there will be a recovery, right? There will be resources that come. We saw it in 2008, 2009 after the recession. There's going to be a tremendous flood of funding and supports to fix things. But we also saw back then that if you're not intentional about directing that funding to ensure equity, first and foremost, it will end up going to the very ways and people and entities that it just deepens and deepens and deepens the disparity, right? So if we're already thinking about a $250,000 wealth gap in Boston, right, between the average Black family, the average white family, just in net worth, right, pre-COVID. Now what happens when our Black-owned restaurants are floundering at a rate that is much higher and not getting the stimulus relief? What happens when the rental assistance fund isn't necessarily going to immigrant residents because we weren't putting out the translated application until way later in the process? So I think the way that I think it's important to address these issues is that there's going to be a way to make things happen, but we have to know what it is that we want to make happen. We have to think about not just, okay, what's the fairest way to divvy up these too few, dollars or supports or quality school seats or whatever it is.
Right.
But what would it look like if we just imagined the world that we want, where every child got access to a high quality education, where, in the neighborhood that they wanted, with the opportunities that they wanted? What would it look like for us to make sure that every business could come out of this? We know how many small businesses there are in the city of Boston. We could figure out how many are being forced to shut down during this. Okay, and then you get some very, very large number that feels maybe not possible right away. But once you do that, you start to break off small chunks, and you get closer to that ideal in a way that makes sense. I take this last thing, because I keep going on and on about this, but the last thing I will say is, think about transportation, right? So my big passion, my push is around free the T. This will transform people's access to jobs. This will transform the quality of the air that we breathe, the traffic that everybody is usually stuck in pre-COVID. And people said that it was crazy when we first started talking about free T just over a year ago, like a year and 3 months ago. I was laughed at everywhere. And then because we started talking about it, because we defined it, we named it, we put that out there and started to think about what might be possible, by September of that year, 9 months later, the city of Lawrence did free T. A couple of months later, Kansas City did. And now we're having this national conversation about how this is actually pretty possible. And at this moment, even though the T won't kind of use the word, they have gone to provide, there's no fare collection on buses, because we want to make sure that people can sit apart from each other. They're not clustering all near the driver. And so we just have to imagine, put words to what is that world that we're aiming for. Yeah, it's not going to happen tomorrow, but if we don't even allow ourselves to dream of that, there's no way we're going to get close to solving these problems.
Absolutely. How can the general public support you in these efforts and in these initiatives, like as soon as today, if not tomorrow, right, to really help to push? Because you can't do this by yourself, right? So you mentioned, you brought it up for the MBTA and everyone's laughing at you. Well, I need to bring the people who don't find it funny to the table and be like, listen, we have to join, because again, it's a movement.
Absolutely. And that, I mean, that is what government is today. It's not people sitting behind closed doors making a decision and then kind of announcing it. You can't make things happen. You can't solve the issues unless the people who are most impacted. I mean, our Congresswoman says it best, right? The people closest to the pain should be closest to the power. And that's how we have to do government. So I think for me, the starting point is just making sure there's a baseline of shared issues and understanding. I put out a weekly council newsletter that is what we're working on, what conversations are coming up, what we voted on. Is my way of holding myself accountable to people, because there's really no other good way to track what happens week to week. So if anyone's interested, it's a great place to sign up, because I love the replies that I get every week of, hey, you're doing this, think about it this way, or I disagree, or let's think about this instead. We're also doing virtual office hours. We are thinking about various policy areas and how we put together hearings and then legislation for it. So if you're interested, you can follow me on Twitter at WooTrain, or on Instagram, social media, Facebook. We're on. We are listening. We're hoping that every policy item that we push forward is in partnership with community, because that's the only way that we'll make sure that it actually gets implemented and helps to support people's lives and our communities.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. So I want to kind of switch gears a little and go from just a local level to more of a national level politics. So we know Vice President Biden has come out and he said that he wants to have a woman be his vice president for the presidential race in November. One question I wanted to ask you as a woman in politics is, do you think that will hurt him, or do you think that will help him with voters in November when it comes to it?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, my heart was sort of ripped out of my chest with this last presidential election. It's been really just a whirlwind of emotions. And I went to Iowa for Senator Warren. I was at the kickoff. I was in New Hampshire, and we all know what's at stake. And I think no matter what combination of people on the ticket and who it is at the end of the day, we got to get this done. But it is time, for it to be 2020. And we started with a presidential field that was pretty exciting, right? We had young candidates. We had candidates of color. We had a lot of
men and women. Yep.
Yeah. So, I think no matter who it is, we're all going to work hard. I think it'd be really exciting to have a woman of color on the ticket. Certainly there's been some buzz around Senator Warren as well. And there's no better person with plans and policy like we need now. But we have to get close to the point where even politics at the federal level, kind of that much further away from people, is about organizing. And I think there's still a little ways to go.
Absolutely. Thank you. We are coming to a close in our conversation with you, this amazing chat, more so than an interview to me. As we close, I want to give you an opportunity to share any last words you have to our amazing collective and listeners about who you are and what you do and your commitment to Boston. And I'd say beyond Boston, as you create and as you're really curating waves and making mass change happen. And I think you're a trending human. So I really do say that just in thinking about how you've come from a world where your family members were really encouraging you to be a little bit more conservative, right? And to not necessarily shake the waters. And here you are recognizing all of these disparities and inequalities. And you're like, no, it has to change, because it had to change for you. It had to change for your family. It has to change for your children. And it has to change for everybody who occupies this world and planet. So any last words you have for the people?
Yeah, so I want to thank you both first. I know this is, a labor of love for you, but it's also such a gift for the community to be able to have this resource and to get information this way, and to hear your thoughts, and through your thoughts understand ways that people can envision themselves shaping the future of the city. I am someone who never thought I would be in this role, I am first and foremost a mom and a community member. I still identify myself as a tea rider, even though we're not supposed to be on the tea as much these days. But it is something that's so important to my identity because it's one of those rare spaces where people from every background come together, and you're there for a little bit of time, even if it's just a stop or two, or the length of the orange line. You're with other people that you depend on and that you're connected to, even if you might not realize it. And I think Boston is such an incredible city. We are blessed to have resources here. We are blessed to be a city that companies have wanted to move to and people wanted to move into. Our population is growing. And yet, as this pandemic has really laid bare, that success was never equitably and fully shared among all of our communities. And if there's any city that could get this right, if there's any city that could figure out how to make education and schools work for every family, or to make it possible for small businesses to thrive, or to think about, directing city resources and our contracts to align perfectly with our goals around closing the racial wealth divide and supporting minority and women-owned businesses, we can do it in Boston. I find that in our city, we have the resources, we have the activism, we have the ideas. It always comes down to a matter of political will. So political will is just about getting the greatest number of people united behind a change that you want to see. So at the end of the day, wherever you are in this, kind of along the willingness to run for office, to someone who maybe just kind of follows what's happening on social media and can't see yourself ever dipping your toe into a campaign, for example, you have a role and you have a responsibility, and we need you to do whatever you can do. Now, that's not, I hate when people kind of say, if everyone would just recycle more, the planet would be greener, or people would just work harder, or this or that, because fundamentally, this is about government. It's about the decisions that we make as a collective as to what the baseline opportunities and supports are for everyone. So please join us in City Hall, on the City Council. We are here. We are a platform. And I want to make sure that whatever issues are out in the community, that we are elevating them and amplifying solutions that you're also finding and putting into place. So thank you both so much. I'm so grateful for you and for what you do all across the city.
Thank you. I do want to shout out one person who said he wanted to make sure you knew that somebody shared that they are not a fan of politics, but they are a full supporter of you. So Michelle, you matter, and people are watching, and people are proud, and people are really supportive of the work that you're doing. So continue to champion on for everyone. I know it is not easy. You juggle many, many things. And so for you to be on our show today too, we're super grateful. And we're happy to support you in your work, in your efforts, and your initiatives, because again, in order for us to be a city that truly strives off being Boston strong, then we all need to be united as one Boston. So thank you.
Thank you both.
Absolutely. So last thing, Michelle, I know you said it earlier where people can follow you, but let people know one more time, how can they support your work, your initiatives? Where can they follow you? Where can they sign up, subscribe, all of that?
Okay. Our website is michelleforboston.com, but I'm more of a Twitter person. So I'll run my own Twitter. It's @WooTrain. You can also find me on Instagram, same handle, or on Facebook @MichelleForBoston.
Awesome. And that is Woo WU. All right. So thank you all so much. And thank you again, Michelle. And we will talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you for coming on.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Good night. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
That's that. Absolutely. It's always good to be on air. So, I mean, for real, like to all of our listeners, our amazing supporters, constituents of Boston, like we are here because of you. As you heard from Michelle, we all have willpower. We all have a role. We all have a responsibility. So that was our conversation with the Urban Collective featuring Michelle Wu, City Councilor at Large, who's talking to you all about the importance of being very mindful of what equity or inequity looks like in the city of Boston, but also the roles that we all have in supporting policies and procedures that are being implemented, and really being humans by checking in on our neighbors and getting to know what community truly looks like. In order for us to beat COVID, we need to recognize that there were inequities prior to COVID, that there are going to be inequities that have come to the forefront because of COVID, and they'll continue to be here. So unless we all do our part, these are going to be challenges we'll continue to face, but let us be a stronger Boston after this. And again, thank you so much to Michelle Wu for being with us, and it's Bernadine Truth.
It's your man I see.
Yes.
We always want to let you know where you can also follow the Urban Collective Show. So on our Instagram, you can go that the Urban Collective Show. Also on YouTube, the video will be posted on YouTube. So you can tell a friend to watch the video on YouTube in case anybody missed it. That's the Urban Collective Show on YouTube. We are TUC Show 3 on Twitter, if you want to follow us on Twitter. And last but not least, on Facebook, we are the Urban Collective Show. You can also go to our website. We have merch that you can purchase, support a Black business. We have hats, we have shirts, we have hoodies that you can get throughout this time to show your support of the Urban Collective. We do appreciate each and every single one of you that tunes in live, that comments on our page, that reshares our stuff. All the other podcasts out there in Boston, especially. We have a great community of other podcasts in Boston. So I want to thank every single one of you. There's too many of you to name right now, but thank you for being a great support system and just pushing each other, to do better out there. And every week, we always like to end the show with a motivational quote. So this week, I chose something very simple, but a lot of people, I think it resonates with me. It resonates with a lot of people that are entrepreneurs out there that are working. So the way the quote goes is, whenever you see a successful person, you only see the public glories, never the private sacrifices to reach them. So I want to say to all the entrepreneurs out there, you're going to have to sacrifice to get to where you need to be in life. And that's just the way things are. So I want to thank you for listening. It's your man NIC.
It's your girl, Bernadine Truth.
Thank you, and see you in a couple of weeks.
Absolutely.
Goodbye, y'all.